The internet is currently buzzing like a hornet's nest whenever a female character appearance doesn't align with the perception of certain groups. Lately, this escalated into full-blown mass hysteria. You can't choose the lesser of two evils here. You either end up with the sexist label or the woke propaganda activist badge. There are two opposing sides, but what if I told you that both of them influence the game profitability? First, I want to talk about the elephant in the room. People screaming about character design on both sides, live in a vacuum in paradigm of their own visions, and they've forgotten that other opinions exist besides their own. No matter how absurd they might seem to these people, there's no point in trying to force and prove your rightness. Yet, isn't that exactly why we got to YouTube, to validate our opinions? To see if the design of Faye is bad or if Evie from the new Stellar Blade trailer looks like a child? The people starting these arguments are actually a minority on both sides. In most online communities, 90% of users are lurkers who never contribute. 9% of users contribute little, and 1% of users account for almost all the action. They are supported by audiences on both sides, but these are people with completely different tastes and views. They might agree on one thing and disagree on another. If Asmongold was considered based, then after his statement that Evie looks like a child, questions and arguments immediately started directed at him. The gaming audience isn't what it was in the 80s or 90s. That was an era of rebellion where geeks made games for geeks. It was a place of freedom and escapism from reality. Now the geeks who played back then have grown up, and they are rightfully indignant and stamping their feet on social networks. But another younger audience has appeared, one that grew up without knowing games like Doom, Quake, Police Notes, or Age of Mythology. The industry remembers them too and is betting on the future. Right now, the 35 to 40 age bracket is the most solvent audience, but they have to think ahead. ESG and DI have become part of corporate reporting and risk assessment, especially for public companies. In simple terms, if a studio or a game passes the checklist of the things, they receive additional investment. People like Anita Sarkeesian didn't appear out of nowhere with DEI. Criticism of representation has existed for decades. The difference is that it used to be a cultural movement and a debate surrounding media. And later, the corporate world built part of these ideas into its system of risk, brand, and audience management. And yes, I said it's impossible to sit on two chairs. One way or another, a part of the audience will fall off. But that's not a problem for corporations. Moving to the second elephant in the room. When the solvent audience was already fully immersed in video games, businesses asked themselves, where can we get even more money? All these sweet baby ink consultants and the rest were created with one goal: to show positive signals to investors. But that was just a consequence. The real reason stemmed from scandals and harassment lawsuits that blew up the industry, like Riot Games settlement in 2021, Activision Blizzard lawsuit in 2021, California DFEH case. To protect themselves before the courts and investors, managers sold the idea of inclusivity as a genius plan for expanding the gaming audience. That, in the end, led to the fragmentation of internet communities and such hysteria. Now, the third elephant in the room. The majority. The silent majority brings in the main revenue for studios and publishers. Casual players might not care at all about internet battles. A significant part of the revenue is formed by players who don't participate in cultural disputes. The remaining minority is just a storm in a teacup. This majority doesn't care about the problems of Call of Duty, Madden, FIFA, or if some main female character has small breasts. They will buy the game for the gameplay. They won't care how many times Smash GT tries to ask ChatGPT to turn an ugly female character into a beautiful one. They won't care how many times Anita Sarkeesian and people like her speak at GDC. If they come after work, open a beer, put their feet up after a long day and the gameplay brings them joy, they won't dwell on what orientation the main character has or how they swing their hips as long as they are enjoying the game. And that's why we'll move to the fourth elephant in the room, the one who shapes the opinion of the majority, the minority. I'm not breaking any new ground here, I hope, but people often lose sight of the fact that labels are hung precisely by the minority. Gaming media hands one label, and those fighting the media influencers hand the opposite one. The former manages profit flows within the industry. The latter can influence profit from the outside. Although, of course, they can create strong hype, it is greatly overrated, because word-of-mouth marketing is the tool that really drives sales. In simple words, gaming media is an auditor for game studios that works B2B. Investors don't care about internet noise. It's more important for them to read IGN, where they'll see that everything is fine with the game, and they'll issue more money for development, because studios need something to live on. YouTubers, for instance, can tear a game apart, and that's a loss in profit. One successful video from a major YouTuber can damage the revenue of a game. That's why major firms have learned to simply collect information from YouTube in the form of numbers and roughly understand which way the wind is blowing and what risks the company might incur after the sales start. However, it is worth noting that the genius plan about DI still began to show cracks. The same parent company that owns IGN reduced staff against this background because the woke checklist led to backlash against IGN. They don't need that either. They want to sit on two chairs more than anyone else and serve both companies and players. The saddest thing for me in all of this is that behind the appearance of game characters and the arguments about them, the idea of the hero as a character with internal values and motivation has been completely lost. Only a shell remains that passes the checklist for only one group of people. A hero must meet requirements not only in appearance but also in internal character, which should be well received by everyone. You can hate ESG, you can defend DEI, you can ignore all of this and just play, but when you reach the end of this video, you will end up in the room with one of the elephants. The question isn't who is right, the question is which category do you fall under.